So good afternoon and welcome to this StreetGames 2021 conference session on writing your fundraising plan. If you have joined us at any previous sessions over the last week and a half, welcome back. And if this is your first session, you are very, very welcome with us. One of our awesome young advisors, Harriet, is with us today on the call. She is looking after all things technical, including breakout rooms and chat and all that as we go through, which is quite nice because if anything goes wrong, we can blame Harriet, so that's all fine. I'm Kevin Roberts. I'm the Wales Partnership Fundraising Manager for StreetGames, and joining me, I'm delighted to introduce Rachel Scott, who is a Sustainability Lead for Yorkshire and Humber region. So Rachel, over to you.
Hello everybody, welcome to the workshop. I'm just going to go straight into just the housekeeping really for the workshop. So just bear with me just for a couple of minutes whilst I just share screen and get the slides up that we're going to work our way through. Okay. Right, well, welcome to the workshop. We hope you enjoy it. It's going to take no longer than an hour and a half. It might be a little bit less than that time. We'll see how we go. And as Kevin said, yes, I'm Rachel Scott from the Yorkshire and Humberside team as the Sustainability Lead. So just to start off with the kind of housekeeping rules, just really firstly to say that it is a two-way workshop. It's not a webinar. So we are going to actually have some tasks where we can kind of share ideas and learn from one another. Before we start, we would just ask if you find a quieter space in the house, just away from others to allow you to concentrate. If you can, it would be great for you to switch your cameras on so we can actually see you. And obviously, if you could mute your microphone in between contributing. And obviously, if you're going to actually input some ideas, obviously just remember to unmute yourself. And also, if you want to actually add any questions or queries in the chat box, Kevin is going to be monitoring that as well. And finally, just respect one another's opinions in the feedback. And obviously, just at the end, if you can with the chat box, just tell us how it's gone, what you found useful about the workshop, and what we could improve for next time. So the format for the workshop, just the aim for the workshop is really developing a greater understanding in writing a fundraising plan to give your organisation the best chance of being successful in raising funding to support your different projects and programmes. And if we just look at the objectives, firstly, we're going to be developing some ideas on a fundraising plan for a year of fundraising activity, reviewing the fundraising environment and identifying appropriate fundraising opportunities, and finally establishing objectives, timescales, budgets and appropriate fundraising techniques. And really just to say that having a plan, it basically mobilizes motivation and commitment to make something happen, and in this case it's raising funding to support the work that you do. It will guide action for everyone, it will direct your focus, and it allows flexibility as well for you to respond to opportunities when they arise. So just really, we're probably just going to, I'm going to unshare for this little bit, and then I'll come back to this slide. We would just like you just to tell us your name, the organisation name that you're representing today, and just to tell us how you would usually fundraise. So I'm just going to stop share so we can see you all.
Jane, you are first on my screen, so can we start with you, please?
Yep, I'm Jane Nolan. I do some consultancy work with StreetGames around doorstep sports offers, but today I'm here for Anfield Sports and Community Centre in Liverpool. I'm a trustee of the community project. I suppose our fundraising, I mean, I try and take, well, I do take most of the lead on that. So it's normally grants, applications. Obviously, we've worked with StreetGames and access funding around Fit and Fed. Yeah, so a lot of it is more formalised, and I think I'm just looking at today at other opportunities, whether that's organic funding or whichever way that we think about fundraising. Yeah, so that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jane. Jules, you are next up on my screen.
Hi, I'm Jules. I'm the partnership lead at Active Surrey. Started just before lockdown. So we are a not-for-profit organisation, part of the Active Partnership. So we struggle in a sense for fundraising because we're not a charity. So I'm coming across quite a few barriers with regards to working with organisations, and also, as you said, Jane, we do look at funding applications from grants, but I'm finding in the last 12 months that a key barrier of ours is the fact that we're not a charity. We're hosted by our local authority. So so me as an individual, as a person who's looking to diversify our income, I'm struggling quite a bit. So I'm hoping today's session might help us bring some ideas.
Wow, thank you very much for that, Jules. Rebecca?
Rebecca Ferguson, I'm Children's Services Manager at Westview Project in Hartlepool. We have two strands. So we have Westview Project CIC, which runs outdoor activity programs for local schools, voluntary sector groups, anybody who wants to come and do outdoor activities. We have a large forest just on the outskirts of Hartlepool where we run forest school programs, which a lot of the schools buy into. And then we have Westview Project Children and Young People's Activity Centre, which runs our children's youth clubs and out of school provision. So that is set up as a charity. And then obviously the other one is CIC. So for funding, the charity is quite easy to find funding for. It's quite easy to write bids, fundraise with parents, with the children, whereas the CIC, through lockdown, we've had no income. We don't pay business rates, so we didn't fit into any government grants. The reason we don't pay business rates is because we share a building with another organisation and they pay the rates. So yeah, finding funding for a CIC is quite often tricky, so I'm hoping to pick up some tips from this.
Let's hopefully we can give you some as we go through. Thank you, Rebecca. And then finally, Georgina, are you there? Don't think Georgina is there. That's no problem. We'll crack on. And Harriet, I haven't warned you about this, but I'm going to put you on the spot. I do apologise. If you just want to say a couple of lines about yourself and how you've come to be involved with Street Games.
Yeah, so I'm a master's student at Leeds Beckett, and I'm just a young volunteer working with Street Games. So I've been involved in a few things throughout lockdown, revolving around discussing situations of how to kind of make kids more active outside of school and things like that, and projects such as I did like a Leeds Council meeting where we discussed ways around children developing skills to progress them forward outside of school. So I've just become, it's only recent, past few months. So yeah.
Great, thank you very much for sharing that with us, and thanks for all the technical support you've given us and are going to continue to give us as the conference goes on. So Rachel, back to you. You're able to share your presentation again.
Right, so the next slide really, Kevin, is the exercise that you were just going to do, and it's really just asking everybody to list all the different types of funding and income that is possible, thinking about traditional forms and more innovative methods of funding and income. So do you want to, I think we were going to ask them to put that in the chat box, weren't we, Kevin?
We certainly were. So if you can open up the chat box for me, which should be on the bottom toolbar on Zoom, and just pop into there, as Rachel said, all the different types of funding and income and investments that you think are possible. Maybe you've accessed them before, maybe you haven't accessed them before. Try and think outside the box as well if you can. Anything that could bring money into your organisation. Grants and foundations, fab, thanks Jane. Grants, crowdfunding, organisation races, I think that is Jules. Backpacking at a local supermarket, awesome. Commercial income and funding, absolutely. Sponsorship, absolutely another great one. I'll give it a few more seconds. Supermarket tokens, definitely. Those little green tokens spring to mind. Event sponsorship. Fab, what a great list. Car boot sales. Okay, Rachel, do you want to move the slide on?
Yes, you can see everything. Everybody can see the slides okay.
So far, so good.
Yep, okay, let me move on then. Okay, so thank you for all those suggestions that you put in the chat box. I'm now just going to summarize the different types of funding and investment opportunities. So really just to start with grants and funding, and really there are four key sources of grant funding for non-profit organisations, and these are, the first one is UK statutory or government sources of funding, and these tend to be offering grants. This could be a council department that's offering grants to further their own objectives and statutory responsibilities. These opportunities are more likely to support core costs, and they can be quite large grants on occasion, but they're more likely to have quite a comprehensive and complex monitoring and evaluation system. So it's important as applicants just to recognise that when applying for that source of funding. The second source of grant funding is lottery funding. So you'll probably recognise this from Awards for All and the Community Fund, Sport England lottery funding. So that it's important to recognise the difference between government funding and lottery funding. The third key source of funding that I think is probably going to be not as prevalent going forwards is EU funding, and there were a couple of big funding programmes through European funding, but that's obviously going to be less as we've come out of the EU recently. And then finally, trusts and foundations. Now, trusts and foundations, there are thousands of different trusts and foundations that you can apply to, but they're specifically established to distribute funds. What I would say though is that they'll only fund things that are charitable in law according to their trust deed. So you need to actually look at what their criteria is just to make sure that you have a good fit with what you're applying for. The grants from trusts and foundations tend to be one-off grants. They don't really like you to keep going back and applying, and they tend to be smaller. They can range from a few £100 all the way up to, you know, a few £1,000s. The second, third area, crowdfunding. I'm sure you've all heard about crowdfunding. This is a practice of raising money from a large number of people using a kind of a crowdfunding online platform. And Sport England at the moment have something called Active Together Crowdfunder, where for a project that you're actually looking to put together, they will match up to £10,000. So if you raise £10,000 from your crowd using the crowdfunder platform, Sport England will match it up to £10,000. The fourth area, sponsorship. I think one or two of you mentioned this in the chat box, sponsorship from local companies. This is becoming more popular. Companies are recognising the importance of corporate social responsibility, but obviously they want something back for the sponsorship, so they're wanting to obviously raise profile and communications positively in the community. The fifth area, high net worth individuals giving. Obviously this is donations into the organisation, and I have worked with sports clubs in the past where they've identified certain benefactors in their community or linked with the club that have probably given. On one occasion I worked with a rugby club that they had a benefactor that was prepared to contribute £50,000 to the project and the facility development that they were proposing. Some other areas, just to finish off this slide, possible external contracts. So you'll see with local councils, sometimes there are opportunities to tender to deliver certain services. And so there is a further opportunity there with the fundraising, and just to think about that in terms of your fundraising plan. The penultimate one there on the bullet point is income from participants. Obviously, if you're delivering sports activities and you're making a minimal charge, obviously there's an income there that you can actually bring into your organisation. And finally, fundraising events. So this is all your typical things like your raffle, car wash, race nights, everything like that you can actually set up and deliver to raise income. Anything to add there, Kevin, before I just move on to the next slide?
I think just to add to that, particularly from a fit and fed perspective, which obviously we're leading into summer now, so fit and fed is going to become a lot more prevalent through the holidays. And what we tend to say to LTOs when they ask for funding or funding opportunities is firstly think about what's around you and what's around your organisation. So rather than having to wait, say, 3-4 months for a traditional funder, for example, are there any churches around your organisation? Are there any supermarkets that might be able to support you with food? Are there any other charities that could support you? Could you work in partnership with them to deliver something while you're waiting for funding? Have you spoken to your local community voluntary council, who often tend to be able to release funds a little bit quicker? So just thinking outside the box and looking around your organisation. What have you got around you? You know, what's in your town? Who could help you deliver stuff, and being a little bit inventive with it while you're waiting for the more traditional sort of funding opportunities.
Great, thanks for that, Kevin. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Where to search for funding. So we've just put down here various opportunities where you can identify funding. The first one, Funding Central, actually, I just checked it this morning. I've just checked through all of these just to make sure if they were current. That actually closed on the 31st of March this year, so that isn't available. Funds Online it's a kind of a opportunity for you to kind of access funding for individuals and charities through grant making charities. They have about 8,000 different trusts and foundations opportunities on their database. And there is a user license. I did check the subscription this morning. If you're a charity, it's approximately £462 for one user, and a standard fee is £636. So there's a cost to that one. Get Grants is more of a providing advice and information. They provide training on bid writing and application review. And they do have a funding finder service that is actually free of charge. They will only have about a few hundred opportunities for funding, compared with Funds Online that had about 8,000 different opportunities on the database. Funding Eye is a fundraising consultancy based in Wales. I'm not sure, Kevin, if you are aware of Funding Eye, if you want to add anything on that.
I've got nothing specific to add on them. No, I've not actually used them in the past.
Right, okay. The Good Exchange is basically an online matching platform that connects funders and fundraisers. And obviously, finally, local council. It's always a good idea if you are trying to identify funding to actually put in your local district council or county council and just type in community chests, grant opportunities, community grants, and you'll be quite surprised sometimes in terms of what comes up. So it's always good to actually search through your local council. Equally, and I think we have got an active partnership on the call, active partnerships will provide news updates on funding opportunities, and in most cases they will actually have a list of different funders that they've obviously searched to, and feel that there was a good fit for sports and physical activity related projects. And finally, community foundations. You'll have a community foundation in each of the counties, and they'll administer a number of different grant programs on behalf of different providers, but they tend to actually they're looking to support projects that are supporting the most disadvantaged communities and marginalized groups, just to kind of recognize that. So there's some opportunities on where you can actually look to identify funding opportunities for your fundraising plan. So moving on to the next slide. So we're just going to focus on why do a fundraising plan? What's the importance of it? So firstly, it allows you to know if you're on the right track with your fundraising. It allows you to prioritize your funding needs and actually have some focus in pursuing those targets. It gives you the confidence to say no when needed. I always think it's never a good idea to in terms of going for grants, never good idea just to chase money. You need to have a clear idea in terms of what the funding is required for, and really just making sure that you fit the criteria and actually stick to your fundraising plan. It helped you to focus fundraising in the right areas, making effective use of resources and avoiding time-wasting activity. It's going to allow you, the fundraising plan is going to allow you to identify different staff to undertake different roles to actually deliver the full fundraising plan. It shows you where you may need more resources, gives the opportunity to look to the future. And I think when planning grant writing in particular, you need to plan well in advance. And I always think if you're looking for funding to start something in September, you need to actually be starting to think about obtaining the funding February, March time, a good six months in advance of when you would actually need that funding on the ground. And I think if it's a facility development project, you need to double that time. It needs to be a good year, 15 months in advance. Finally, funders may ask for it. So on occasion, a funding body might ask you to submit your fundraising plan with a bid. It's not often asked for, but it can be on occasions. And finally, a fundraising plan can breed success. It can help you be more successful if you actually have that focused format for fundraising. So in terms of planning, we are actually now going to just split up into some breakout rooms. So I'm just going to go through the different things that I'd just like you to be thinking about in the breakout rooms. So it's thinking about the following. Why do you want or need to fundraise to keep your organisation going? How much is needed to keep you going throughout the year? What problems, issues do you want to solve? Who do you have around you to put the plan into place? And what funds do you know come out regularly or ongoing? So I think it's thinking, do you want funding to actually support your core running costs? Or is it a project cost, a specific project that you're wanting to develop? I always feel that grant bodies will favour project related requests for funding rather than core running costs. So it's just bearing that in mind. And actually setting an annual target for your fundraising and thinking about others to help with the fundraising.
Great. So we're just going to have just a bit of a conversation between us all about what you just discussed in the room. I'm reliably informed that you didn't quite get through all of the questions, which is absolutely fine. But it would be fab if someone could kick us off with something you did talk about or something burning you did discuss that you want to share with us all. This is where everyone speaks at once.
I think in our group, we decided that the trickiest thing was finding funding for core costs. We just unanimously agreed that that's the thing we can find the grants and the fundraising for projects, but it's the core costs that we're struggling with.
Yeah, we also sort of, well, I know I mentioned that your sort of fundraising needs change depending on lots of things, and sometimes you start off on one path and then something changes, so the boiler breaks and you've got to then go for a boiler, or especially in the voluntary community sector where we just can't phone up a maintenance team and say, oh, can you just come and fix this? You know, it's like we have to do that ourselves, or the roof now needs repairing and we didn't know that was going to come this year. And so sort of things change around that, you know, until you've got that bigger plan in your head, but sometimes that's superseded by other things.
Yeah, I think the core costs point there is a really good one. Certainly when I'm searching for funding, or I have been searching for funding in the past for either StreetGames or other organisations, like historically core costs seems to be one of the criteria that is way down the list in terms of what can be applied for. I have, to be fair, in the last couple of months, core costs are starting to creep in slowly to a number of funding opportunities, but they are still quite far down the list. But there are funders out there that do offer core costs. Not many of them, but they are out there. So what we'd say, if you're struggling to find, if you do really need core costs funding and you are struggling to find them, drop any of the Street Games team a line. The details will be up on the screen at the end, and we'll help you the best we can as well.
Yes, certainly grant programs on the community foundations, they will support running costs, and also with National Lottery Community Fund, they will also expect a kind of a full cost recovery. So I know that's one funder that will support kind of running costs and that element in the bid. Just to throw that in there.
Mm-hmm. Fab. Any more? What else did we discuss in the group, in the breakout room there?
I suppose maybe that sort of partnership approach that we were chatting around, sometimes you have to work collaboratively with other people, so someone can access the funding and then buy services from you, so there's a bit of a win-win. So it's not always about working in little silos. I think if we network and work with other people in the localities, there's a greater chance of impact and a greater chance of securing funding in that way.
Yeah, definitely, and that sort of goes back to what I said earlier in the presentation about looking at who's around your organisation, who's in your town, who's in your county, who else can you partner with. I ran just this morning. I ran a session with Stuart Goswalk, who's the CEO of the Wembley National Stadium Trust. So he's a direct funder, and one of the things that him and other funders are really looking for is organisations working in partnership. It's really, really important to them that they can see organisations coming together to solve a problem, rather than 3 or 4 different organisations all going off trying to solve the same problem and end up almost competing with each other. So you're absolutely spot on. Partnership working is really key.
I think sometimes when it's a partnership approach, it's working out who is best placed to actually make the application. If it's grant funding, it's working out who's going to have a better chance to kind of front the application on behalf of the consortium or the partnership group, and just making sure that organisation fulfills the kind of the appropriate legal status to be able to apply. Sometimes a funder will stipulate only open to registered charities, so it's just thinking that through as well in terms of the governance.
Yeah, definitely, Rachel. I think just to add to that as well, another thing that I come up against quite a lot is income levels of charities or organisations. Funders will have different levels of income that they'll accept. So you can't be above, for example, £500,000 a year, or you can't be above £1 million a year, for example. So when you've got different organisations coming together, that's another thing to think about in terms of who is best placed. If one of your organisation's incomes is too high or too low, then it's better that somebody else applies, but it's still a partnership approach. It's just applying in someone else's name.
Yeah, the good point, Kevin. I always, that's one of the first things to look out for. Although I think a lot of the organisations that we work with fall well under the $500,000 in terms of turnover. So, but yes, it needs to be checked first and foremost before you actually start to pursue writing a grant application. Shall we move on then, Kevin? Shall we move on, or does anybody else just want to share anything around fundraising generally, just to open it out a little bit, not necessarily relating to the questions that we've posed? If you just want to explain about a successful project or fundraising that you did locally, or just anything you want to share at this stage.
Sure. We have a collaborated bid with another 2 organisations that we were funded from the Region Communities Fund from the National Lottery.
Oh, right.
So we have three youth clubs. So it's ourselves, Kilmarnock Road, and Westview Project, that covers 3 geographical areas in the town. So we're completely separate to each other. And they funded us for 3 years for car costs for our youth club. And they like the fact that, I'm sorry, I'm lying, we've got 4 organisations, but one's not a youth club. They like the fact that we'd collaborated, that we're working together, we meet regularly, so we have monthly team meetings. So I manage the fund, and I do all of the monitoring and everything like that. So we meet monthly, we discuss what we've done in our sessions, what's happening, any barriers, any training needs that we have as organisations. And the young people have a youth advisory group between the 3 youth clubs as well. And they're doing together, so we've got a youth advisory group, so they work together to plan things in a club tournaments and things like that, which obviously they haven't been able to do since we got the fund in April last year, but they are starting to plan them again. And they are also part of the Street Games Young Volunteers programme.
Great.
So we've got about, I think we have about 20 young people from the centres.
Yeah. And Rebecca, how long, you mentioned it was the Reaching the Communities Fund. Was that Reaching the Communities, was it the Partnerships Fund, or was it just the Reaching the Communities Fund?
No, it was just the Reaching Communities Fund.
Reaching the
from the
Communities,
National Lottery.
because I know there is, I think there's Community Fund, there's Reaching Communities, and then there's Reaching the Communities Partnerships, where they're really looking for a collaboration.
It's just Reaching Communities, yeah.
I'm interested to know, how long did it, I mean, it's really great that you've secured funding from Reaching the Communities, because it's not an easy fund to actually, you know.
So we were previously a YIF group, so we'd had YIF funding for 3 years. December 2019, we put in the Reaching Communities expression of interest and got invited to do our formal application, which was awarded the beginning of March last year and started on the 1st of April in lockdown.
Right, okay, so the process,
so we've done our first year.
Yeah, the process itself, how long did it take you to prepare and get the outcome, to actually start the process and actually have an award?
It was easier than I thought. It was my first like big that I'd done, because I'd taken over this role from somebody else. Yeah. The expression of interest that we had to write was just, I think it was about 3 pages long. Our local funding officer, who was responsible for taking our bid to their deciding board, was amazing. She couldn't have given us any more information if she tried. So we sent our expression of interest. She sent it back and said, have a look at this, have a look at that. We sent it back to her. She accepted it, then came back to me, and we had a meeting where she questioned everything, because she really needed to know the project, because she didn't submit our expression of interest. She went to them and sold it to them.
Yeah, she championed it. She championed it. And I've got one final question on it, just because I'm curious. You know, it's an interesting funder, and when someone's been successful with that funder, I'm always keen to find out a little bit more. I know there's a big emphasis on putting people in the lead with their application process, and I'm just interested to know how you actually demonstrated that, you know, how you actually did that in your application.
So we brought in our local financial advice service, which is Westview Advice and Resource Centre, who we share our building with. They run the community centre in the area that we work in. The other 2 partners also sit in community centres. So we used the fact that we are the centre of our community, we all have community groups, the fact that part of our bid is to bring in our communities closer. So we've now got, have you heard of the bread and butter thing?
No, I haven't.
Right, it's a low-cost food service. So they come to us, volunteers from our community pack up shopping, and then families can register to buy, if they get 3 bags of shopping for £7.50, which essentially saves them about £38 a week. So we brought them in. So that's completely run by community volunteers. We talked about the fact that we have community cafes that are run by our local community. We are currently working with parents to upskill parents to become volunteers. We run parent drop-in sessions. Our youth club staff are able to refer directly into the financial service that we've got on board, and if they need it, accompany them to their appointments to make sure that their finances are in place, or they're claiming the right benefits, or they're getting help with debts that they're in. And we brought in that, well, we we know that it works because our parents tell us that they want us to these appointments,
right? So
and they feel confident talking to us. So yeah, it was
great.
It was a really good process to go through, to be honest.
Yeah.
And if you know your project and if you're confident about your communities, then you can. It just comes when you're writing it.
Yeah.
I did find it loads easier sitting at home to write it rather than being in the office. Yeah. I don't know why.
And how much funding did you secure, Rebecca, from them?
We got 340 something thousand over 3 years. So we got 3 years funding.
I mean, that's fantastic, and that's a good sum of money, isn't it?
But that is our core offer. So that is literally, it pays for our evening youth clubs. So it's 3 sessions for under 11s, 3 sessions for over 11s for each service, but nothing in the school holidays. So anything that we want to do in the school holidays, we have to find external funding for.
Right, okay.
And as from September, each of our centres gets their own financial advisor based in their centre 1 day a week, so that parents can access it more easily.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Rebecca. It's just always good just to see what somebody else has done and how they've developed the proposal. Does anybody else, Julie, is it, or Jules, do you want to share anything from an active partnership perspective? I'm just taking the moment really just to get a bit of discussion going, because we're getting through the slides quite quickly. So I just think that there's a natural point, if you do want to share anything, you know, make a contribution.
I think both Jane and Rebecca are fully aware of the active partnerships in their areas, and we talked about obviously funding from Sports England, so I think they're probably a bit more knowledgeable than I am, but obviously from an active series perspective, we do have our own network and we do have our understanding of what grants are coming through. So I'm guessing at some point, if anybody does need to know what grants are available, it should probably be on the website, or there's at least a link from the active partnerships or active Surrey or one of the active partnerships within their regions will have usually a page on funding opportunities.
Great, thanks for that, Julian. And have you made any county-wide bids at all on behalf of Surrey to bring in funding? I know there haven't been quite the same opportunities for that with Sport England recently, but I know in the past there were opportunities, weren't there, to apply for. I think there was Active Universities Fund. This is quite a way in the past. Have you actually brought together to develop a county-wide bid for any programs?
I started just before lockdown, so
right.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure, and we definitely haven't since obviously I've started, so I'm still fairly new to the role, so and it doesn't really sit within my remit, but as such, so yeah, sorry Rachel, I'm a bit vague.
No, don't worry. I know there was something called the Families Fund not long ago, and it's just whether or not the active partnerships were actually assembling and submitting a county application, but don't worry, it was probably a couple of years ago, so before you came into post. So anyway, I think I'll move on. Thank you for that discussion. I'm going to move the slides on. Can everybody, so what else to include in the fundraising plan? So it's just recognising at this point that the fundraising plan is broader than just grant programmes. We've mentioned other sources of funding, sponsorship, donations, crowdfunding, potential tender opportunities. So the fundraising plan is the plan that focuses on all of these areas. So what else do we include? Well, it's basically just making sure that we're linking the fundraising to the planned areas of growth and where you hope to extend provision and address new areas of need. So I think it's tailoring your fundraising plan to your operational plan and picking up on your priorities for delivery. So this could be, you know, if there is a focus on holiday activity, food provision, the HAF funding, youth leadership, if that's something that's of interest, doorstep sport activities, these types of things. So it's kind of linking your fundraising plan to your operational delivery plan. It's also thinking about a fundraising plan beyond kind of raising monetary support, and it's thinking about securing in-kind support. And this could be a donation of equipment, donations of food, donations of venue hire. Now, remembering that these items can be used as an in-kind contribution in a bigger grant application. So if you haven't got any match funding, you can create a match contribution from an in-kind support. And also securing in-kind support, professional support such as marketing, bid writing. So all of these things can be built into your fundraising plan and tasked and allocated accordingly. So it's just thinking beyond money in terms of the fundraising plan. You need to think about growing the fundraising team, and it shouldn't just be reliant just on one person doing everything. It's a good role for volunteers, and particularly young volunteers. And I recently ran a clinic in my area, and it was a college that dialed in, and they were actually keen to actually have somebody to continue to deliver their enrichment offer to students and working with the community. And I suggested that they, you know, if they couldn't identify grant aid to support that type of role, that to look for students and interns that are looking for work experience. You know, someone might just come in for 6 months and actually could pursue some grant applications on your behalf, or pursuing the crowdfunding, etc. So just think about growing the fundraising team and not just leaving it to one person within the organisation. And then finally, you need to consider, I've mentioned this already really, how you fit your fundraising plan alongside your organisation's overall strategy. So the two have to fit together quite well. So just moving on to the next slide, and I'm sure with the people that we've got on the call, I'm just conscious that we've got, you know, professionals on the call today that are probably very used to setting out action plans in a smart format. The format for this workshop is more, it's geared really for kind of community-based groups. So apologies if I'm telling you something that you already know here, but I'm just conscious that we've got professionals on the call. So when you're actually setting out your fundraising plan, and we're going to share kind of an example fundraising plan on the next slide, it's important that you set smart objectives for the plan and to break smart objectives down to each task or action that you're actually setting down. And smart referring to being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely. Now I'm not going to go through those too much because I'm fairly certain that everyone on the call today will probably understand what those terms mean. So just some final questions obviously relating to that is, do you want to just raise money? Is your fundraising plan just purely about raising money? Do you want to increase the value of donations and grants? Do you want to diversify your income, or is it solely around grant opportunities? Or are you actually going to look at some sponsorship and some crowdfunding alongside it? And are you going to use any new fundraising techniques? So they're the questions that you need to think about when setting out your plan. So the next slide is a kind of an example that my colleague Emma, who wrote the material for today's workshop, she's the sustainability lead in the London region. She set out this as an example of a fundraising plan. Obviously, you can set it out month by month, obviously clear tasks in terms of fundraising activity, in terms of what you're actually going to do, month by month, the specific work that you will need to do, the target amount that you're actually going to look to raise, the priority alignment with your operational plan, and obviously allocating who's actually leading this specific task. So that's an example that we've set out for a fundraising plan. And I'm just going to now hand over to Kevin just for the final tasks of the workshop today. Kevin, do you just want to introduce this next task?
I certainly can. I have just popped into the chat a link to a OneDrive document, which is what you've got on your screen without the template activity writing across the front of it. So if technology works, you should be able to click on that link and it will open up an online Excel sheet. So what we'd like you to do for the next 10-15 minutes, no more than that, is we'll put you back into the breakout room. Harriet will work her magic and put you back into the breakout room, and just have a think about what can you put in there to kickstart your fundraising plan. What do you think is important to go in there? It doesn't need to be hard and fast, doesn't even need to relate to your own organisation if you don't want it to. That's absolutely fine. But just to get you started, start to think about what could go into a fundraising plan. Is that okay, Rachel?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't think any more than 10 minutes. I think 10 minutes will be enough time, Kevin. So
yeah, that's fine. And I think that the one other thing to say, you should be able to, with that link, download a copy of that document to keep offline. If you want to, you're more than welcome to. If there are any technical issues and you'd like a copy of this document sent to you, it's an Excel. It's only an Excel sheet, but it is quite useful. Pop your emails in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to email them across to you afterwards.
I can't get it to open at the minute, Kevin, to be fair.
No problem. Jane, I've got your email. I'll send it across to you.
It just says the copy. It's copied me a link and I put it in my browser, but then it doesn't open. But I am on a Mac, so I don't know whether it's just a conflict.
It's stating read only.
I haven't got the link in my chat.
Ah, interesting. Technology is working wonderfully. I tell you what, to make this easier, because there's only 4 of you. Jane, don't worry, I've got your email address, but the other 3, if you pop your emails in the chat, I will send this across to you. I'll send this across to you right now, just to give you a chance. You might be able to open it.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're not going to ask you to feedback on that. We hope that was a useful discussion, just sharing ideas. We're in the final few minutes of the workshop today, so I'm just going to close just by saying, after you've drafted the fundraising plan, obviously it's a good idea to share it with your team and sharing with other organisations as well. Because actually by sharing with other organisations, they might just be aware of another opportunity that you might be able to pursue and build into your fundraising plan. So it's always important to share it out across different partners, stakeholders and groups. You need to obviously finalise and start to work on the actions within it. So you need to write your plan. You've put the effort into writing the plan, and then you need to look to deliver it and keep on point with it month by month. And then after you've completed your plan, evaluate at the end of the year or quarterly what's gone well, what could be better, were you able to dedicate enough time, and really take on board these findings for the next annual plan that you will put together. So this is a little quote that Emma, that produced the slides, has put in. Those who have indeed formed a reasonable fundraising plan and then put the necessary time and resources in to implement it nearly always succeed. So she's just put that onto the slide just to get you thinking about that. Kevin, this is really just the final couple of slides. Kevin, do you just want to introduce the Sustainability Lead team and the rest of the courses that are actually listed on here, just so people have the dates that we've got set up for future courses?
Yeah, I certainly can. So I should have mentioned this at the start, and I completely forgot and handed over to Rachel far too soon, which I apologise profusely for. But in the wider Street Games team, we've got 6 sustainability leads. I believe I'm right in saying that, who are dotted around the country and all responsible for different areas. All do the same role, but in different areas. As you can see on the screen there, and they're split up by area. So all the email addresses for the areas that are on there, feel free to take a picture, take a note. The Northeast, you'll see there, we have appointed, I do believe, to the Northeast. We're just waiting for notice periods, etc., before they actually come into post. So feel free to note down the email address you want or take a picture of them all. But as I say, we have got 6 sustainability leads who work with Street Games dotted all over the country. And this is the brilliant work that, as Rachel said, is led by Emma Tugby, who's the London Sustainability Lead. So we have a sustainability programme for all organisations in the Street Games network, and we've got dates in for webinars, as you'll see there, for the rest of this calendar year, covering a range of different topics, and they're split up. They're colour-coded bronze, silver and gold. And that's just depending on experience and confidence and what you've done before. So obviously bronze is sort of more foundational or entry level, and right up to gold, which is the more experienced fundraisers amongst us. They're all free. I believe they've gone out on our social media, and I think they're on our website. But if you do want to book onto any of those and you can't find the link on our website, just drop any of us an email and we'll be happy to send you the booking links for those. But they're penciled in for the rest of this calendar year. There's also a race for investment. You'll see top left, which is slightly different. The next one starting in September, which is a five-week course which takes you through the whole raft of webinars. So it's a complete fundraising course over 5 weeks, 2 hours a week. You do need to attend each session to get the most out of it, and then the aim of that is by the end of it you'll hopefully have completed 1 or 2 or more funding applications. But Emma, who's leading on that, will take you through the whole process.
Thanks for that, Kevin. And really, that's the end of the workshop. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask of me or Kevin? Okay, well, I'm going to thank you for attending. We were just slightly before time. I hope that's been of use to you. Do let us know what you think, how we can improve the workshop for future. It is more tailored towards community groups, the workshop. So do let us have your feedback. But thank you for attending today, and I hope it's been of use. Thank you.
Sorry, Rachel, I just was on mute before you moved on. But you know, the fundraising plan template, is there somewhere we can go for one which is maybe a little bit bigger? Because I've just found that I'm not quite sure where I would sit all the smart objectives in. You know, is there somewhere we can go where you put a time thing in it, or you know, I guess just do that yourself type thing, you know?
I think the slide that we've put up, it's really just giving you a framework, but I think you've to adapt it to suit your needs. So if you've got a lot more content that needs to go in, then obviously just adapt that template to suit what you want to do. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Jules.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Rebecca, Michelle.